Nick Park and Merlin Crossingham are the directors of Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Nick, I want to start with you because obviously you've lived with Wallace and Gromit for so long, creating them over the years, many short films and now two features. How do you know when it's the right time to return to the universe of Wallace and Gromit? And how do you know specifically when you want to make a feature film?
Yeah, those are very good questions. I think, well, I mean, we Merlin and I have Wallace and Gromit bubbling away all the time for ourselves. But yeah, the question of when to make a film and especially a feature film, all the films really, we're waiting for that idea usually, that idea that really has legs and that has great potential and for humor and comedy and drama. Um, a new situation. And with this one, I mean, it was actually way back in the time of Curse of the Were Rabbit that I had this idea kicking around about Wallace inventing smart gnomes, a smart gnome that would help, so that could a smart gnome that would help Gromit do his garden chores, and and it. But it was kind of lacking something. It came in kind of two tiers. This idea, really, years later, I realized, tinkering around with the idea while being distracted with other projects, um, realized that it needed some kind of sinister motive behind it. It couldn't just be about machines going wrong again. And then this idea of what if Feathers McGraw might be the perfect solution here, because he has this whole history with Wallace and Gromit. He has been put in prison by Wallace and Gromit 30 years ago for stealing the blue diamond. Um, so it was the perfect solution to what we needed and gave enormous, really up the ante of the idea and gave it real legs and a real chilling tension as well. And it suddenly became a sort of a Cape Fear with penguins, which was not what we intended at the beginnings.
Yeah, and Merlin, you've been in the Wallace and Gromit universe for a very long time yourself, but this is the
Mm.
first time you're co-directing a feature film. What
Yep.
were you most excited to do with that feature now that you have the opportunity that maybe in all of your different work with Wallace and Gromit you haven't been able to explore yet?
Mm. You're right. I've worked with Nick since the late 90s as an animator and then through the years as a director. And I think, I mean, really what a feature film allows you to do is to dig deep into all the places where in smaller projects you can only skim. And so not just with the characters, we've taken Wallace and Gromit just we've pushed their relationship a little more than we ever have, and that's at the heart of it really is just digging into the characters more. And then there's kind of the flash stuff, we can do bigger, more and just be a bit more expansive and a bit more cinematic with the way we approach the filmmaking than maybe some of the more ancillary kind of productions that weren't sort of big headline productions. So I think that's it for me. Yeah.
Yeah, to talk about the visual style, and we'll get into kind of the cinematic stuff in a moment, but obviously the Aardman animation style is so iconic and is integral to Wallace and Gromit. And you've both been with Aardman, working with Aardman for a very long time. How have you seen the style of Aardman evolve over the 30 plus years that you've been working with them? That's for both of you. Let's start with Nick.
Mm.
Well, I guess from very early on, the company was started by Peter Lord and David Sproxton back in the 1970s, and I joined in 1985. I brought my characters with me, but I mean, Peter and Dave had a style of their own. They started doing morph, which Merlin's done a lot of. Um, which is it's like I don't know if people know morph, but it's like a British Gumby, we used to call it, a kind of very much clay and a basic human figure. But they were doing Peter Lord and Dave Sproxton. They were doing stuff that was maybe slightly more realistic. Wallace and Gromit is more blobby and round and soft, and so styles have evolved. And Pete and Dave, bless them, have always been open to and encouraging new talent and new directors, new visions. So it's quite an eclectic Aardman is quite an eclectic group of different people around the company with different kind of styles. But I guess this one has dominated a bit, over the years, with the eyes close together, the big wide mouths, and you know, and yeah. So is yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
And I think from my side, because I started as a character animator, um, we, as in the animation team, always relished being pushed, and the directors, and back in the day, that was Peter Lord and Nick and Steve Box. When they push us and we kind of rise to that challenge, and then we get pushed more, and not just us, but all of the departments that are making films. Going back from Chicken Run, the things we did on Chicken Run, we never even thought that was possible. Come Where Rabbit, that's easy, and it gets pushed again, and then you get Pirates, and it gets pushed again. So just as a studio, we move, while stylistically it it there's a familiarity, and the core technique is exactly the same as it ever was. Everyone who's there making the films with us are just so good, I mean, it's just a delight to work with. So I mean, they're just exquisitely talented, everybody in all the departments, that it's almost a, you don't feel like it's a problem to ask for something difficult. You know it's difficult, but you also know that they are going to meet you, and maybe, if you're lucky, exceed your expectations. And that's just a wonderful working environment to be in, really.
As always, there are great visual jokes and gags in this film. I personally love the two books that we see Gromit reading and how they speak to the moment that he's experiencing. I wanted to ask each of you, what is your favorite kind of visual moment where maybe the joke is not, said, but if you're paying attention and really involved in the film, that you're going to pick up and laugh at?
You try to make each scene the best, don't you?
Yeah.
It's
But if it's
it's
just like a
hard.
hidden sight gag,
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm.
there's one in right at the end of Act 3, and there's a sequence on a train. I know you've seen it, but I won't give any spoilers away. Where there's a sort of a border between Lancashire and Yorkshire, a bit like a state line in America. And on one side it says "keep out," and on the other side, as the camera goes past, it says "no, you keep out." And you might, it's so hidden away you may not even see it. But I love that kind of
That's
thing.
great. Nick?
I'm trying to rack my brains because it's all because since we've seen it a film a billion times, and it's all become a blur now. But I mean, I just think one of the scenes which, well, I guess it sums up the what the scene is about. The breakfast scene where it sums up what the whole film is about, really. When really Gromit is feeling that his life is overrun with gadgets, and all he really wants is a pat from his old friend as a comfort. But Wallace has a gadget to do that. I won't give the game away, but Gromit does get his pat, but not from Wallace.
Those are
Um,
great moments. I also, as you said, Merlin, a lot of folks have seen the film. Many more have not yet seen the film, so we won't spoil any of the details. But I also just love the kind of inspiration and genres that the film draws on, from heist, and even I get some like some gothic film moments. Really just wonderful inspiration. Were there particular movies that you were referencing or that you really kind of studied when you were
Mm.
putting these sequences together? Or what other sources of inspiration visually as directors did you draw from? Merlin, let's stick with you.
Well, I mean, because it's very much leaning into the film noir kind of, as a broad sort of cinematic nod, very much sort of uh, looking at how Mrs. Danvers, in Rebecca, glides out of the shadows and how she gaslights, and that very much informs Feathers and the way that we spoke with Dave Alex Redette, our director of photography, and his team about how we would set about lighting this, and very much using the lighting as a character and as a sort of a quite a physical thing, even though I mean, like it can have a feeling of weight to it, and so that was very important. Um, uh, Cape Fear very much was an
Yeah,
early one. What else, Nick? There was
yeah. Just well, right from the beginning, we discuss all the movies we've been influenced by and want to emanate, emulate.
Village of the Damned.
Village of the Dam was a big one with all the whole vision of these gnomes walking the streets, as in Village of the Damned, where the kids are like possessed by an alien force and they stop and turn in very deliberate ways.
Yeah,
So that's very much at the heart of it, isn't it? That of the horror
yeah.
aspect.
And then
Um,
there's lots of others where we've done little nods, rather than sort of films influencing us in terms of style, just sort of like little. That's a little nod, like Aliens, when
yeah,
Gromit's waiting for them to come down the street and they're not there, but they're on the scanner, that kind of thing.
yeah. Italian Job on the
Yeah.
bridge with the
There was a
teetering
couple
on
that
the
we
bridge.
where we'd storyboarded, and it wasn't a sort of a nod, but it in hindsight it might look like it, which is we just storyboarded a bit where Gromit uncovers his motorbike, and then the
Mm.
trailer for Mission Impossible came out. No, Top Gun, sorry. And Tom Cruise did almost exactly that. And so it
Yeah.
was like a moment of
Mm.
the creative sort of common zeitgeist of, and we so, but you know, it's a lovely cinematic
Yeah,
moment, and
we
we
even
both
did
using it. It's great.
we gave Gromit a pair of Tom Cruise glasses, sunglasses, didn't we?
Yeah,
But
we did. Well,
that was just a bit too on the nose.
You're alluding to some of the really terrific action sequences in the film. There are chases. There's obviously, we won't spoil them, but there's also kind of a boat chase that's hilarious and very dramatic and climactic. Take us inside the process of putting those together. I mean, they're incredibly cinematic, like you said earlier, Merlin, but also I have to imagine painstakingly created. So, Nick, let's start with you. What is it like to put something so kind of high speed and intense actually on camera using this film technique?
Yeah, well, we first of all start off with storyboards, and well, we also just even more basic. We write everything down in order as how it might seem, and we play around with that for ages. We stick it on storyboards, uh, cut it together as a reel. The drawings can be quite simple, but they give us an idea of what the angles are, and it's not just about the action itself, but it's about who's winning. It's got to be going to and fro all the time, and you set up an expectation, then you undercut it, and then set up another one, and you undercut it. So it's constant. Don't give time for laughs. Just keep it going, and then that gets translated. The sets get built based on all of that, and then we start with fantastic Dave Alex Redette, the DP, and his fantastic camera team all get on board, and we start. Then we set up the animation on the sets, and we also the art department as well. Matt Perry in the art department, a heck of a lot of planning in terms of how are we going to build this thing. Miles and miles of canal in this case, and how much can we do in front of the camera, and how much do we need to rely on digital effects and digital backgrounds, that kind of thing. So there's a heck of a lot to work out. So,
yeah.
What would you take it from there, Merlin?
Yeah. I mean, it's a beast. It really is a beast. And also, Nick and I did half the film each, and for Act 3, it was itself divided into sort of almost alternate sequences, and we're shooting the beginning and the end at the same time, and making sure that just from a cutting and a pace point of view, that the stuff at the beginning isn't too fast, so that by the time we get to the end of the sequence, so we just choreographing it between us was quite a thing, and we discussed at length. And again, that template of the story reel becomes really a vital document in the making. But yeah, I think, as Nick said, the starting point for us was always, can we do it in camera? And in that case, it uses a lot of motion control of to get the camera feeling fluid, getting the action feeling fluid, and in many ways, just we have to just go for it. And by the time we get to actually animating it, you need to have a confidence that you are just gonna, we test things. We don't just shoot it for the hell of it. But we can only do so. Animation is so time consuming. There's only so much testing we can do before we have to go, actually, we're committing and we're making it. So I mean, it's quite a roller coaster ride for us as well, because of all of it. There is an element of unknown that you kind of have to go with. And that's kind of, I mean, in a very slow animated kind of way, it's quite exciting in its own right.
Yeah. You always like storyboard far more than you need as well. So
Yeah.
it's always a really painful thing, to go through it. Which gags aren't quite landing? What could we lose? There's always the producer saying we've got to cut some shots. We can't afford to do, if we do this, we can't afford that. So we've got to decide which of them.
And it might not always be like a money, we can't afford it. There might not be enough time. We might be running out of days. It might. So it's very, very complex thing to wrestle.
Before I let you both go, I have to ask you, Nick. You've won a few Oscars for Wallace and Gromit. Gold Derby is an awards website. I believe you've won 3 Oscars for Wallace and Gromit and 4 in total. Back to some of those nights. Do you have a particularly fond memory of winning those awards and accepting them? The speeches are great. The bow ties are wonderful. Is there a particular moment that stands out from your time at the Oscars that you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's funny when I find myself saying to people, "Oh, was it the wrong trousers Oscar or the close shape?" Because it all gets blurred together. I mean, it's incredible. Just suddenly you're in the middle of Hollywood, in meeting every famous person you've ever seen or heard of. It's incredible. If you've got an Oscar in your hand, people are just shaking your hand the whole time and just overwhelmed all the time by. I suppose the funniest thing was that with my first time I was up there, I was up with 2 films, and I wasn't sure if Creature Comforts would win or A Grand Day Out. And my biggest problem was I was afraid that if I did win, I might thank the wrong set of people, because I had 2 lists there with me, and I was really afraid that. But it's a nice problem to have,
I'd say it's a fantastic problem to have. Nick and Merlin, congratulations on Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Fowl. Thank you so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you, David. Yeah, great to meet you.